I have devised a specific science to creating a good action scene, and I call it the WEC rule. WEC is an acronym that stands for Weight, Environment, Composition, and Character. These are the 4 traits that you must have to make a good action scene. There are other things you can have, like music, color, and choreography, but that's the icing on the cake. It's not essential. These are what's essential. Allow me to elaborate. Weight stands for both the literal weight of the characters and the impact of their attacks. You can't just see it. You have to feel it. And there is a way to do this. First off, through the speed of the characters. Typically, heavy characters will move slowly and lighter characters will move faster. Makes sense, after all, the heavier something is, the harder it's gonna be to move. But did you know this can also be used to convey the power of an attack? If an attack goes by super fast, it's not going to register as much. Meanwhile, a slower moving attack will give you ample time to process what's going on. And that is how you create a feeling. Even if the attack is supposed to be going by fast in universe, you can use slow motion to give it that build-up. Other things you can use to create this feeling is environmental feedback. That is, showing what the attack does to both the person receiving it as well as the environment they're in order to show how powerful the attack is. For example, say you have one character swing at another. The other character is able to duck out of the way, causing the attacker to create a hole in the wall. That allows the viewer to see how powerful the attack was and can give off the feeling of, oh crap, it's a good thing that didn't hit me. Even if it's a weaker attack, you can still leave little scratches and grooves in the wall. When hitting the person, depending on how far they fly back, also helps to illustrate the power of an attack. The more recoil they get from the hit, the more powerful it was. Attacks can also cause items to be knocked around, create craters, make rocks and tiny items fly around, and you can't go wrong with big, billowy clouds of dust. And don't forget the timing! Timing is the most important aspect to creating a feeling of impact. To illustrate this, look at this little animation I made. If you have one person punch another and you use the exact same amount of frames for every part of the action, it's gonna look kinda weird. However, if you remove some frames from the end and add some frames to the beginning, bam! Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs? Finally, cement the scene with some editing tricks. If an attack is especially powerful, give the screen a little shake. Maybe add a flash on the screen when a character punches another if you have a lower budget, as this is a cheap but effective way of creating the feeling by causing the audience to flinch. And don't you dare forget that sound design. All those other aspects alone are great, but throw in some satisfying and well-timed sound effects, and it puts the sequence on a whole new level.
There, I'm in. The pulse is online. The trigger should be up there next to you. Whoa! Woo! There, I'm in. The pulse is online. The trigger should be up there next to you. Whoa!
A great example of weight used in a fight scene is Spider-Man vs. Venom in The Spectacular Spider-Man. Note how, thanks to Spider-Man's smaller stature, he's able to dart around Venom and inflict more damage. Meanwhile, Venom, who is much larger, moves a bit slower but leaves a heavier impact with every punch, illustrated not only by showing Spidey fly backwards, but by adding a satisfying sound effect and shaking the screen ever so slightly. Next up is environment. Environment means to both set your characters in an interesting location and have them use and interact with it throughout the scene. For example, you could have 2 people fighting in an empty room, but let's try and be a little more creative here. Let's put the scene in, say, a grocery store. What can these characters do to each other while in a grocery store? They can throw food and other objects at each other, spill milk or juice on the floor to slip them up, maybe chase each other with shopping carts. There could be pedestrians that they have to deal with, either by holding hostage or trying to keep them out of the way, and that's just a few possibilities. And all of these make the scene immensely more entertaining than just punching each other in a room. And while you can have flat, non-interactive test of skill fights, those should be minimized to keep it from getting stale. And keep in mind that by interesting environment, I don't mean that you have to keep constantly blowing the audience's mind with crazy new and fantastical areas. You just need to put the characters in a non-linear environment with multiple things to interact with. A great example of environmental action scenes is, heck, pretty much all of the action scenes from the Dick Figures movie. You have the opening fight scene in a playground, bashing jungle gyms and climbing up slides, the harbor scene where they run from boat to boat using whatever equipment they come across to get away from the demon ninjas, or the chase scene in Paris where they're constantly weaving around traffic trying to avoid cops. Then there's composition, which I already talked about, so just keep in mind that visual clarity is very, very important in fight scenes. And finally, character. The need to understand the characters in the fight and who they are as people. When devising an action scene, you must always make sure to have the following questions in mind. What are these characters' skills? What are their personalities? And what is their goal in this scene? A good action scene will answer these questions without words. To elaborate, skills means both their superpowers and just their regular physical skills. For example, if you have a character that knows how to fly, then they're probably going to want to try to fly in a chase scene. And if you don't want him flying during your action scene, then you have to make sure that you give a reason as to why he can't. Otherwise, the audience will keep asking themselves, hey, why isn't he flying? What are their personalities is very important because it'll dictate how they act during the scene. If they're particularly hot-headed, then they might want to drop what they're doing and just fight whoever's after them. If they're super cowardly, then they're probably gonna want to run and hide or try to reason with the guy, basically just do whatever it takes to not have to fight. And you gotta keep these consistent too. For example, if the cowardly person decides to just drop everything and fight what's chasing them, well, that won't make a lot of sense to the audience, so you gotta give a motivation for it. And finally, what is their goal in this scene? Whether their goal is to obtain an item, to defeat the attacker, or to run away from someone chasing them, they are always going to be pursuing this goal during the scene. So again, if the character just stops doing whatever it takes to achieve the goal, well, the audience ain't gonna like that. So for example, if someone's chasing them and they're trying to get away, but then all of a sudden they stop and they see a coffee shop and they're like, oh man, I could really use a coffee, and then they go and they get one. I mean, if this is supposed to be like a kitschy comedy, then that's one thing, but if you want people to take the scene seriously, then it's gonna really ruin the tension by seeing them just stop what they're doing to have this funny joke. You'd be surprised how many movies do this. A good example of a character-driven action scene is this chase scene from Ratatouille. What are these characters' skills? Skinner doesn't have many outstanding skills. Remy is able to climb and run fast and fit into smaller spaces. What are their personalities? Skinner is somewhat crazy and determined to no end, using whatever means necessary to achieve his goal regardless of how ethical or legal they are. Remy is good-natured and wants very much to help out his friend and do what's right, and thanks to his upbringing is awfully resourceful. What is their goal in this scene? Skinner wants to catch Remy and get those papers back, and Remy wants to escape Skinner and get the papers to Linguini. And we see these answers illustrated masterfully in this scene, because let me tell you, if there's one guy who knows how to do a good action scene, it's Brad Bird.